Thanks very much for that, Greg. And joining me now is Phil Twyford, Housing and Urban Development Minister. Thank you for being here.
Morning, Jess.
You are set to build 100,000 houses over the next 10 years. On average, that works out to be 27 per day on average. How is that doable?
Jess, I think everyone knows that we inherited a mess. But I'm really confident that we're up for the job. In our first 100 days, we are taking the first steps towards setting up our Kiwi Build program, our Housing Commission to lead the development of big urban development projects. We're banning foreign buyers. We're about to pass legislation that will make it illegal for landlords to rent out cold, damp homes. We've really hit the ground running, and I know expectations are high, but we make no apologies for being ambitious about fixing this problem. We have a social and economic disaster in this housing crisis. It needs an ambitious response.
So you can build 27 houses per day on average?
I think we'll build more than that. Jess, we are going to
so more than 10,000, 100,000 over the next 10 years.
We're going to build 100,000 affordable homes for young Kiwi families to buy. We're going to ramp up the building of state houses instead of selling them off as the former national government was doing. And we're going to do that in the context of large urban development projects with all kinds of different housing types, including open market housing.
So this is what I want to ask you about, because the price of a house, you say that is affordable, 600,000 for a house, 500,000 for an apartment or townhouse. How are you going to get developers involved in this? When, if you look online, for example, we can see an example in Three Kings where a 3-bedroom townhouse is 1.3 million. Why would they be interested in working with the government?
So at the moment the problem we've got is a massive market failure at the bottom end of the market, and developers are choosing not to build affordable homes that young families can afford. They're building at the top end because they're in the business to make a dollar. We're going to put the government in the market and choose to build affordable homes at scale, large volumes of them, and on-sell them at cost to first home buyers. We know we can do it because there are some people who are choosing, some companies, some non-profit organisations choosing to build these houses already. The difference is, under Labor's Kiwi Build policy, we're going to do it at scale. What
about with the developers though? Will you be subsidising them to try and entice them to build these houses for you at a much cheaper rate?
No, we're not going to be subsidising them, and in fact we're about to go out to market and talk to developers about exactly how the Kiwi Build offer is going to work with them, and what we're proposing to do is to say to developers, look, if you're building a development with 400 townhouses or terraces, you can make a share of those Kiwi Build affordable houses. We'll buy them off the plan.
But that's only a portion of those new developments. How are you going to build these $500,000 and $600,000 homes?
So we're confident that developers will build those homes if we're offering them the kind of scale and volume that they need. And the critical thing here is that uncertain access to finance means that a lot of these developments are falling over or are on hold at the moment. We're going to take some of the risk out of it, speed up those developments and actually guarantee a supply of affordable homes.
But how are you going to do that? Because if you, let's say you go to a development at the moment, 10% on average. If you say, look, we want 50% to be affordable homes, that brings down the value of the development.
Yes, but we take some of the risk out of it and speed the project up. That's good for the developer's bottom line. We're also going to be doing this at scale, and so when we're tendering Kiwi Build homes, 10,000 a year, that means some developers and some construction companies can sharpen their pencil and do deals, for instance, on the build costs and building supplies that we've simply never seen before in this country.
You have your doubters on this, including the Reserve Bank. It says that it's going to be more likely 5,000 houses rather than the 10,000 because private activity will decrease. What do you say to that?
There are the doubters and there are the knockers.
But this is the Reserve Bank.
Well, actually, the Reserve Bank commentary was made on the basis of some Treasury advice that I don't believe was based on all of the information to hand.
So that Treasury advice was wrong, you think?
I don't think they had. They made certain assumptions without looking at all aspects of our policy. For example, we know that workforce constraints are a big issue.
Sorry, I just want to make sure. So you're saying that the Treasury advice was incorrect?
Yes, I am.
That seems like a very bold move for a new minister.
Well, we've looked at the advice. It was based on incomplete information. I've had the Treasury officials in my office. We've talked through all of the elements of the policy, and I'm confident we're going to move ahead and be on the same page. Their advice was based on the fact that there are constraints. Now, of course there are. The former government didn't invest in the workforce. We're going to. We're going to throw open the doors of the polytechs. We're going to massively increase apprenticeships and the construction trades. We're going to grow the local workforce.
But you're cutting immigration, though.
We're going to bring in skilled tradespeople from overseas, just as the past government did in Canterbury after the earthquakes. We're going to work with companies that can use off-site manufacturing, building houses in factories that don't need such a big workforce. We are going to address these constraints. But look, I make no apologies for being ambitious. This is a crisis. It requires an ambitious response.
Who's going to get these homes? Will they be means tested? How will it work?
They won't be means tested. We think that we're going to build affordable houses. We'll ballot them in the first place because...
Does that seem fair, though?
Well, we want these homes to be available to first-home buyers. We're going to build thousands of these homes, Jess, but we have to ballot them in the first place. That is the fairest way to do it, and we don't want to set up a heavy bureaucratic means testing regime to do it. But Jess,
don't you want to target those people who actually need it? Isn't that the point?
Well, there are lots of people who need it across different income brackets.
But don't you want to make sure that the people in need, of the greatest need, get the first wave, if you like? We're
going to be doing things that are going to ease the housing crisis for people right across the board. So we're going to make life better for renters. We're going to build more state housing. We're going to massively increase the supply. But Jess, I'll say this. It's not the first Kiwi-built house that's the most important. It's the last Kiwi-built house. Because when we build that last one, that will mean that we've fixed the crisis and a whole generation of young Kiwis will have a crack at the Kiwi dream of affordable housing.
Have you thought about targeting your police, your teachers, etc., especially in Auckland, where it's so hard to get houses?
Yeah, we have this ridiculous situation now where it's because we have the house prices in Auckland are so expensive, the very people that we need to run the city and keep the economy ticking over can't afford to live in the city. But the only really sustainable way to fix that problem is to tackle the demand and the supply factors that have given Auckland some of the most expensive housing in the world, and that is taxing speculators and massively increasing the supply of housing.
So why not give those first houses to police, to teachers, to make it easier?
I think it would be virtually impossible to do that in a way that was fair and efficient. We need to just... You know what? The answer to this problem is to build more houses.
And to give it to the people who need it the most.
Yeah, but we're not in the business of setting up some heavy bureaucratic system to allocate them on the basis of need. Honestly, Jess, I don't know how you would do that in a way that was logical and fair and efficient.
State houses, how many will you build, new houses will you build on top of the Kiwi-built homes?
So we said, while we were in opposition, that we wanted to deliver a net increase of at least 1,000 a year, and we said we wanted to be more ambitious than that. I've asked officials to look at how we can double that and build 2,000 extra state houses a year. And I'm looking forward to their advice coming back to me on the options.
Because they're desperately needed, aren't they? We saw figures that were on the news on our show last night saying that it's 27% increase of those on the waiting list compared to last year.
One of the really disturbing things that's come out in the last couple of weeks is not only the fact that we have a shortfall of 71,000 homes in New Zealand. That's information the former government did not release in the lead up to the election. But what's also disturbing is that when I look at the data on homelessness and emergency housing, it seems to be that there has been a huge suppressed unmet need for housing, overcrowding. And now, as we've had this big public debate about it, more services have been provided, a bit more housing's been provided. There's more and more demand coming out of the woodwork, and that's extremely concerning.
You said there's going to be a blanket ban on selling state houses. Is that smart, though, given that you may have $1 million homes that could provide housing for 3 or 4 families in other areas. And there are a lot of Housing New Zealand themselves say that there are 4-bedroom homes, that's what they need, and there are too many 3-bedroom homes at the moment.
Our commitment is to stop the mass sell-off of state housing.
Mass, what do you mean by that?
Well, at the moment...
So you will be selling some?
The National Government was, in the last term, negotiating to sell 2,500 state houses in Christchurch, and our commitment is to stop that.
So how many will you sell?
Well, you may, I think, you might sell the odd one here and there to maintain the portfolio.
How many, though?
I can't put a number on that.
But it's not a blanket ban, which is what you were saying.
No, it's never been a blanket ban. We've said we'll stop the sell-off of state housing, the mass divestment of state housing.
But you will sell a few. So it's mainly selling off.
No, you'd be crazy not to sell the odd one here and there to maintain and upgrade the portfolio. National's policy was the wholesale divestment of thousands of houses to private investors and the private sector. That's not our policy. We are going to build thousands of extra state houses. Jess, if
when you say that, I just want to clarify something though. When you say you're going to sell the odd state house, how many?
I can't put a number on that. But you'd be silly.
Can you give us a ballpark figure?
No, I can't.
But less than the 2,000 that National...
We won't be selling them off in batches of hundreds and thousands, which is what the former government was doing. Look, if the former government had built a couple of thousand extra state houses every year it was in office, we would be 18,000 state houses ahead instead of the 5,000 behind that we are now. We simply would not have a problem with homelessness if they'd done that.
Let's have a chat about where these houses are going to be built. Going out is part of your plans to areas, for example, like Pukekohe, which grows a lot, is very rich soil there. Last week on the programme, Fina Owen did a story where she spoke to growers who are really concerned that you're going to allow building on some of their rich soil. I want to play you a clip and then get your reaction, so let's have a listen to that now.
Sure.
All of that there was all cropping good crops 3 years ago. That's all residential.
Is very saddening. So what we should be doing is building all over our inferior soils and keeping our better ones.
Nick Smith, he passed it all off as a special housing area, and now it's been built on, it's all been fast-tracked. I just think it's criminal and it's a shame.
Food security should be at the foremost of everybody's minds.
In New Zealand?
In New Zealand.
I'd like to speak to the Minister of Housing, Phil Twyford, and come and show him what's going on here. And I'd like him to see him face to face and ask him, is he going to keep taking these valuable soils, or is he going to see it our way and put the brakes on it?
So what's your answer to that question to that grower?
I share that grower's concern, and I don't want to see special areas, whether it's the growing soils of Pukekohe, whether it's the Waitakere Ranges, sensitive coastal land. I don't want to see that swallowed up by housing. I campaigned in opposition against the former government's crazy plans to build housing on urban parks.
So how are you going to stop it?
Well, already Auckland Council's unitary plan actually protects, I think, almost all of the top growing soils out in Pukekohe. It's not our intention to change that. In fact, Jess, I want to see a planning system that allows our city to make room for growth, but protects areas of special value for future generations.
But that's their concern, you see, because if you put a little area like this around and build houses right up to that, you've got irrigation issues, you've got spraying issues. How are you going to protect areas like that?
That's right. That's absolutely right. And that's the job of Auckland Council's unitary plan. The encroachment that we see in Fina Owen's story largely happened as a result of old zoning decisions and Nick Smith's special housing areas that pushed through housing developments without good planning being done.
Just finally, will you go out and have a chat to those growers at some time in the next few months?
I'd be very happy to, because I share their concerns.
Right, thank you very much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
100,000 a year. That's over a house a day, Raymond. How ambitious does all that sound? Too ambitious?
That's very ambitious. There's nothing wrong with optimism. But the problem is, as the last government found, turning the housing issue around takes time. And 100,000 in 10 years is a very easy number to remember. And it's going to be in 3 years' time is the next election. It's very easy to also to divide the number 10,000 by 3 and say, well, what have they done? So I think these are numbers that are going to come back to haunt Labour. But having said that, you know, there is nothing wrong with setting such targets. The problems are manifold, however. Can they find the builders? Are they able to keep within the 600,000 cap in the case of Auckland, particularly with the inflationary pressures that are likely to come from council valuations that are just about to be announced, and people expectations grow and prices can go up as a result. So there are a lot of problems to face, but as I say, there's nothing wrong with trying to achieve them.
Is it too ambitious, Nicola?
Look, I think this is where the rhetoric of opposition hits the reality of government. And we've had the Reserve Bank call the bluff this week and say, look, there's no way there's going to be 100,000 new houses built, 50,000 maybe. And actually, Phil Twyford's walked back a bit over the past week or so. What he said is, look, there's 3 ways we're going to jiggery-pokery to get to that number. One, we're going to do Kiwi buy, so we're going to buy houses that were already going to be built. And I don't think that's what New Zealanders were expecting when Labour were campaigning. 2, we're going to take the credit for housing developments that were already underway under National. And again, I don't think that fits the bill, the definition of new housing. And then finally, yes, they're going to build some new houses. And I imagine that this week the developers, the property developers, are rubbing their hands with glee, thinking about these subsidies.
You'd wonder how much they're rubbing their hands with glee, wouldn't you, John, when the price they're talking about is $500,000-$600,000. They're not going to want to come on board with that sort of money on offer, despite the volume he's talking about.
No, I think the volume changes the game. OK, and here's the thing, most Kiwis aren't interested in the politics of the numbers. They're interested that there's a game on and significant volume is coming to market. See, over the last 10 years, if you're a property developer in Auckland, you're hitting double-digit numbers in terms of your margins. If you look at the inputs into construction, somebody is charging 20 to 40% on the border and brought in all Kiwis because it's around $1,200 a square metre more to build a house in New Zealand than it is in Australia. So this government has to straighten up a lot of profiteering to ensure that on every line item that houses become more affordable. The Crown is still the largest owner of land. And so it's got significant land. Councils have got significant land and they're going to have to come to the party with it. And property developers that land bank in areas where, if but for the release of that land, the land in Pukekohe, which is highly fertile, would have to be built on, you're going to have to, as the state, make a move on land bankers who are holding up the whole shop. So the last government would never do that. I'm just happy that we've got a massive drive on volume that will require a massive uptake on apprentices and construction work.
Yeah, but the other thing I thought, just thinking when he was saying that, that's all fine and well, but then you start going, well, how many corners are going to get cut here to build these houses that quickly? Are we going to be in the situation we saw with the leaky homes? That's going to have to be something that will be monitored as well.
Well, when you've got volume, OK, when you've got volume, if you have a look at Mangere or Tara, you look at Tatatu West, Tatatu South, you look at the way the previous governments up to the late 70s ran housing projects, they ran them on volume, and the state actually was a major player in the business. Everything changed in '84 on. So when the state comes back in, no, it's got significant levers. The last government didn't want to use those. That's okay because that's part of their process.
But there are some real constraints here because New Zealand's actually running at record high employment, and yet we don't have enough people in this building and construction sector. There is a reality that there aren't enough people to build the houses.
Raymond, I just want you quickly on this, which was a big call that Jess noted as well. Treasury advice is wrong. That's a big call for the Minister to have come out with, isn't it?
It is. No, it's now their Treasury.
Yes, exactly.
So their bureaucrats are giving bad advice. He said he's called them into the office and had a chat to them, but really it would be interesting to get to the bottom of this to find out quite what has gone on, because normally politicians rely on their bureaucrats to be able to support the policies that they're implementing. So it'll be interesting to see. It could well cause some division of opinion between the important bureaucrats within Treasury and the elected politicians.
We heard the line already, you know, we've inherited a mess. We've heard that before. How long does that wash for?
Well, they'll keep on saying it, and there is a measure of truth in this, in that every government that is elected can see a mess that they're supposed to be tidying up. But after a while, if you keep repeating it, people start getting restless. So I think he's got a short period of time. The last government was still reminding people 9 years after Labor went out of office that things had been bad under Labor. But I think you start to lose traction on an issue like that after a period of time.
Nicola, the ballot side of it as well, not prioritising. What are your thoughts on that? Is that the fairest way to give these houses to people, or should it be done on means testing? Should it be done in a different way?
Look, I think what the Minister must be afraid of is the stories in the New Zealand Herald saying, I'm not allowed to buy one of these affordable houses, it's not fair. So he's trying to avoid that, but the reality is those stories will happen anyway, because not everyone will win on the ballot. And just look on that point of the Treasury, I think that's really ominous, because what the Minister was saying today was, if the Treasury don't agree with my numbers, I'll see that they do.
Well, firstly, we've got a problem in our bureaucracy because it was heavily politicised under the last government. So once you've got a politicised public service, in the old days when a new mob came in to take over, public servants did what they're told, and that's because you win the Treasury bench. The problem you've got is that a number of them are well paid and have been deemed to be underperforming and underwhelming. So sometimes their advice has been wrong, and it was wrong to key in millions of dollars by Treasury. And the call that reserve banks make has been contested before by both governments and opposition. So this is a very important part of our politics in terms of the debate. So I think I don't have too much problem with a minister in a new government taking umbrage with the advice they've got, because the advice has been set on different instructions, and it's going to take some time for that to roll through. So I think after Budget 2018, you'll get a better view.
They haven't got a lot of time, though, because in the time of the show, on their schedule, they'd have built one house, really, in an hour. The State House rollback, that was a lot easier line on it than we've heard before as well, Raymond. Some will be sold. It's not a blanket ban.
No, I mean, it would be foolish to have a blanket ban on it, because there are small houses in large sections in very expensive parts of the country that could easily be freed up. So you'd be foolish to say that none of that won't happen at all. But on the other hand, what he wants to avoid is the kind of wholesale sell-off of state houses, and that's something that this government has been strongly committed to for a long time.
I also want to touch on the story, the work that Whena Owen's been doing about the sprawl and the growers out in Pukekohe, Ramarama, and places like that. How do you address that? That's a whole other problem, isn't it, Nicola?
Yeah, look, I thought that was a really interesting part in the interview, because the Minister wasn't prepared to say, well, look, in reality, if we're going to get more houses built in Auckland, we are going to have to build them in land that hasn't previously been developed. And again, that's where the rubber hits the road. If you can't free up more land for development, where are the houses going to be built? These are the kind of difficult issues that a Minister and government has to struggle through.
The Pukekohe growers' losses are the gains further down the island and further up the island in the agricultural sector. And whether we like it or not, the pressure of urbanisation, either going up or out, takes that land. Now, the question there is that it's a value proposition. And have we got better land further south? There will be transport costs. But with respect to the Hauraki area and the Waikato, we have, and further in the north into Wellsford and back down. So there's for losses for the Pukekohe people, and I don't want to be naughty to them, but I'm just saying straight economics. When pressure comes on, there are other very good arable soils to be broken out, and opportunity comes to other people.
All right, we will leave that there. We'll